He had lived alone for years, his quiet house at the edge of town filled only with memories. Then one headline changed everything. A young boy, just 8 years old, left orphaned with no family to claim him. When Elijah walked into the foster system, no one imagined how his life would be transformed. In a town quick to judge and slow to accept, one act of compassion would spark a journey of trust, resilience, and the undeniable truth. Family isn't always born. Sometimes it's chosen. Before we dive in, hit that like button and subscribe so more stories like this reach people who need to hear them. Marcus Thompson had spent most of his days in quiet solitude. His small ranch-style home on the outskirts of Cedarville sat at the end of a dusty lane surrounded by fields that stretched to the horizon. Life was simple, predictable, and for the past 5 years painfully lonely since his wife Diana passed away. He kept busy with minor home repairs, gardening, and the occasional woodworking project. But beneath the routine there was a persistent emptiness, a quiet ache that neither time nor distractions could fill. Some nights, Marcus would stare out at the dark fields, thinking of Diane's words about helping those in need, about opening one's heart to others. One chilly Saturday morning, Marcus found himself at the corner diner where he and Diane once shared pancakes. The smell of coffee and toast filled the air, but his mind was elsewhere, until a worn newspaper caught his eye. The headline was brief, brutal. Young boy orphaned in tragic accident. 8-year-old Elijah had lost both parents in a car crash. No relatives had come forward. He was now in the foster system. Marcus felt a weight settle in his chest. Memories of Diane's voice echoed in the quiet diner. Maybe we're meant to help someone who needs us. Something inside him shifted. For the first time in years, he imagined a future beyond the walls of his empty house. A life that mattered, a life with purpose. 2 weeks later, Marcus found himself signing adoption papers. The idea had seemed impossible at first. Yet as his pen touched the dotted line, a resolve grew stronger than any fear. He would give this boy a home, a chance at love, and a place to belong, even if the world around them whispered doubt. Elijah's first night in Marcus's home was quiet but heavy. The boy clutched a worn teddy bear, eyes wide in the dim lamplight, listening to the creaks of a house that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. Marcus sat across the room, unsure if he should speak or wait. Finally, he broke the silence. "You don't have to say anything tonight," he whispered. "Just know you're safe here." The days that followed tested them both. Elijah was wary, flinching at sudden movements, avoiding eye contact, and retreating into his own world. At school, he was labeled difficult by teachers who didn't know the depth of his loss. Some parents whispered behind Marcus's back, questioning why a man who had lived alone for so long would suddenly take in a black child from the system. Their looks were heavy with judgment, a reminder that society often sees difference before it sees humanity. At home, Marcus faced challenges he had never imagined. Elijah refused food, stormed out in frustration, and sometimes lashed out, directing his grief and confusion at the only person who offered him a home. Marcus's patience was tested. He worked nights to understand, to connect, to find the boy behind the fear. Slowly, routines began to form. Bedtime stories, shared meals, walks through the fields that had once felt empty to Marcus. One afternoon, a note arrived from Elijah's school. "Elijah has been bullied," it read. The boy's classmates mocked him for being different, for his circumstances, for the very tragedy that had brought him to Marcus's door. Marcus's heart ached, and he felt a familiar surge of anger. Not at Elijah, not at himself, but at a society that could let innocence suffer because of prejudice and ignorance. Determined, Marcus doubled down on his efforts. He spent hours helping Elijah with schoolwork, encouraging him to share his feelings, and most importantly, to trust. Slowly, the boy's walls began to crumble. A smile emerged after a shared joke, laughter after a playful chase in the yard. Quiet conversations where Elijah began to speak of dreams he hadn't dared to voice before. By the end of the school year, Elijah had begun to thrive. But the journey was far from over. Every small victory was a reminder of how fragile trust could be, how courage was cultivated in the quiet moments, and how injustice often hides in plain sight, shaping lives long before compassion arrives. By high school, Elijah had developed a keen interest in technology and entrepreneurship. He spent hours learning programming, designing apps, and reading business books borrowed from the local library. Marcus watched him tirelessly, quietly amazed at how the boy's drive turned grief into fuel. Every setback, a failed project, a skeptical teacher, a hesitant peer, became a stepping stone rather than a roadblock. The turning point came when Elijah pitched his first startup idea, a platform connecting local artisans with buyers across the country. Skeptical at first, Marcus encouraged him. "You've done the work. You know the value. Now let the world see it." Elijah poured everything into the project, working nights, coding endlessly, and learning marketing strategies. He faced rejection, technical failures, and financial hurdles, but each challenge only strengthened his resolve. Within 2 years, Elijah's startup gained traction. Orders came in from cities far beyond Cedarville. Investors recognized his vision. The boy who had once clutched a teddy bear in fear now led a team, giving opportunities to others, mentoring younger programmers, and growing a business that reflected his resilience and ingenuity. The town, once whispering doubts, now watched in awe. Marcus's quiet decision years ago to open his home to a grieving child had yielded far more than anyone imagined. Elijah's success became a symbol, proof that love, patience, and belief in someone's potential could defy prejudice and produce extraordinary results. One evening, Marcus sat in his workshop, tools in hand, watching Elijah's latest video call with a client in another state. The young man paused, looked at Marcus, and said, "We did this together. I couldn't have done it without you." Marcus felt a surge of emotion. The boy he had once comforted, taught, and protected had grown into a source of strength, a reminder that compassion can ripple into a life transformed and that sometimes giving someone a chance is the most powerful investment one can make. Years passed, and Elijah's startup grew from a small idea into a thriving business, employing dozens and providing opportunities for local talent. The boy who had once been silent and unsure now spoke confidently at meetings, negotiated contracts, and inspired others with his story. Marcus watched every milestone with pride, realizing that his decision to open his home and heart had created ripples far beyond what he could have imagined. The town of Cedarville, once skeptical and judgmental, had begun to change. Neighbors who had whispered doubt now congratulated Marcus openly. Teachers who had questioned Elijah's potential now boasted about his achievements. Elijah never forgot where he came from. He often returned home to Marcus's workshop, sharing ideas, seeking advice, and sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. The boy who had once feared the world now became a source of strength for the man who had saved him, not just emotionally, but by showing that Marcus's belief in love and kindness had tangible results. During a town ceremony honoring local innovators, Elijah spoke publicly about his journey. He credited Marcus as the anchor in his life. "He didn't just give me a home," Elijah said, voice steady and proud. "He gave me belief. He gave me a chance when the world doubted me. Everything I've achieved started with his trust in me." Applause rippled through the crowd. Marcus, sitting in the front row, felt tears sting his eyes. In that moment, the world recognized the payoff of compassion, a life transformed and a legacy that would continue to grow. That evening, as Marcus and Elijah walked through the fields behind the house, the sun dipping low, Marcus reflected on the journey. One act of kindness had defied prejudice, nurtured resilience, and created a future brighter than he had ever imagined. Elijah had become more than a son. He was a living testament to the power of love, trust, and opportunity. If you like this story of courage and hope, like this video and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories of justice and resilience.